Good afternoon, everyone, to our Protect Our Province COVID-19 briefing for Wednesday, January 12th, 2022. We are live streaming from the traditional and ancestral territory of many peoples. We are grateful to live and work in Alberta, a province on the traditional territory of 48 different First Nations and the unceded homeland of the Métis Nation. Today's conversation is being shared in ASL. To ensure access to completely accurate information, closed captioning will be uploaded after the live stream is complete. This conversation for the public is being shared live on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. Protect Our Province COVID-19 briefing is a regular panel of doctors and experts. We will endeavor to bring you timely, accurate updates on the COVID-19 situation in Alberta and take questions from the public and the media. The views of our panelists do not represent any institutions they may be affiliated with. Actively gathered here as concerned Albertans, attempting to ensure that everyone in the province has access to as much information concerning COVID-19 in Alberta as possible. We will start things off with an update on the COVID-19 situation.
Welcome back, everyone. Before we get going, thank you very much for your patience. I am pleased to say that that is the first time we have had a significant D3 broadcast. So I am trying not to beat myself up over it. Before we get going, I really wanted to say thank you to everyone who reached out to us after yesterday's urgent briefing. The messages of support, the sharing of personal stories, and the generous disclosures of everyone's hopes and fears moved us all beyond my articulation skills. Alberta is an amazing place with amazing humans, and I am so thankful to share this time with all of you. Before we dive into our topic today, I would like to bring Dr. Joe Vipond into the conversation to update us on Alberta's current publicly available numbers. Dr. Vipond.
Yeah, I like that qualifier because as we know, some of these numbers are not exactly accurate at this point. Positivity rate with the number of rapid tests that are out there that are not being reported. But let's go through the numbers. Why don't you throw up the slides? So today, new record, pandemic record of 6,975 cases. Of 6,975 cases. That's a 47.6% increase over last week's 4,726. We have a 5-day average today of 5,848, which is a 55.7% increase over 3,757 a week ago. Next slide, please. And I just put this slide up just so you can see how much higher this wave is compared to the last third wave, which I seem to, or the Delta wave, which I seem to remember we thought was pretty bad. Next slide, please. So positivity, we're flattening out here. We've had 3 days of flat numbers. So 38.33% today. That's compared to last week of 37.10%. Next slide, please. But again, you can see how much higher this is than the last Delta wave. Next slide, please. So this is our hospitalizations and ICUs. You can see how the last 24 hours it's been flat in the inpatients, and that's not going to be real. We'll have an update tomorrow. Just for example, the day I'm going to be using as a baseline, which is, today's Wednesday, so it was Monday, was yesterday reported at 617, today reported at 633, so up almost 16. And then yesterday, sorry, I'm getting this wrong because there's always a day delay. So those are Sunday's numbers. So I'm doing an addition from Sunday to Monday, and that's a 36 case increase to 669. So if we use Monday as our Monday to Monday change, that's a 59% increase in hospitalizations, which is even a bit higher than the 7-day average increase in cases. So we now have a higher rise in hospitalizations than we do in cases. And this is where exponential growth gets you. On ICUs, next slide, please. You can see also that that's rising quite dramatically, up another 3 today to 82. It's up 3 because they revised yesterday's numbers to 79 or Monday's numbers to 79. And that 7-day rise from Tuesday to Tuesday, up from 59 by a 39% increase. So 59 to 82 is a 39% increase. Hope that's making sense. Next slide, please. And this just shows again, comparing those two waves, that Delta wave. We're catching up. I mean, if there's one good thing about this, it's that our ICU levels are much lower now than they were at that point in time. Where the hospitalizations up. So the ratio between inpatient to ICU is a lot wider this time, and I think that speaks a little bit to the difference in Omicron to Delta. Next slide, please. This is the one that always gets my stomach. Another 13 peds admits, and you'll see that there's one new ICU admit for the 5 to 9 range. Next slide, please. And a really large number of deaths, 15 deaths, including one below the age of 50. Next slide, please. And this just shows the the various waves and their various deaths. Very similar big curves for the second and fourth wave, a very flat third wave. And we don't know where this one's going, but it looks very similar to that third wave so far in the initial stages. Next slide, please. And this is the age ranges. They're all going up. There's nothing. I mean, it's definitely to this point a younger person's wave, the 20 to 60 year range, but everything's going up. Next slide, please. And geographically, we have that consistent urban-rural split with the two big cities leading the way. Next slide, please. I've been adding this slide, just showing the number of healthcare workers that are off at the moment. So actually, interesting, a drop in the healthcare workers that are off by 27 today, but still, almost 6,000 people. I think it's really important to recognize that. So our workforce is down 5 or 6%, while our hospitalizations and ICUs continue to grow exponentially. Next slide, please. So one of the things I've been talking about over the last week is I really want to follow these death curves from countries that are preceding us. These are the 3 countries we really talked about as being ahead of us, and South Africa is being the first one. It looks like it's got 2 days in a row of dropping cases. I'm hoping that is a trend, because that would mean they would have peaked out. One of the concerns that I've had is maybe there's going to be a late tail to this mortality curve. So tomorrow will really be a day. If we have 3 days of dropping cases, that'll be the first time since the start of this wave, and that may indicate a peak. Denmark and South Africa peaked out its cases about 20. I'm going to guess it was about 23 days ago. So that would be consistent with previous waves if that is indeed the peak. The United Kingdom peaked out its cases on January 6th. That was 5 days ago. Still growing strong, so we'll have to watch that closely. And then, of course, Denmark still hasn't peaked out its cases per day. It's harder to see because of the scale, but it still hasn't peaked out its deaths either. So those are the things that I'm watching overseas. I think that's my last slide, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vipond. Before we do a deep dive into at-home isolation, as one of our focuses has always been to provide answers to the media and folks at home, I have a question from Cynthia Roebuck of CTV, and would like to invite her into the conversation to ask her question.
So those are the things that I'm watching overseas. I think that's my last slide, Michelle.
Oh, that's so fascinating, Cynthia, you're watching, and that slight little bit of delay versus what's happening in our stream. Would you like to ask your question?
It's always been to provide.
You hear us at the live stream there, Cynthia?
Cynthia, I just muted you because we can hear your computer sound coming out. I can unmute you if this other program has moved over. Yes.
Yeah, you're live now on that.
That's so fascinating, Cynthia, you're watching, and that slight little bit of delay.
I'm enjoying this so very much.
Would you like to ask your question?
Cynthia, I think have the Zoom window open.
Yeah, you gotta shut down the
On the
YouTube
media
or
room.
whatever
Can
you're
you
watching.
shut down the Zoom
Yeah,
room
I
or
just muted you
mute
because
the
you can hear
Zoom
your
room?
computer sound coming out. I can
And
unmute you if this.
then we'll be able to hear you in this room. So let me know when your Zoom room is muted. Okay, I'm going to pull Cynthia out for a second. Dr. Vipond, would you be willing to stick around so I can get Cynthia's question answered for her partway through our conversation with our panel today? Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to move us right forward. So as we know, tiny humans went back to class on Monday, while community transmission of COVID-19 is continuing to rise at levels unseen in our province before. It is a fallacy to think that if COVID is in the communities, it won't appear in schools. And when it's appearing in schools and workplaces and other communal establishments, it inevitably comes home. We had the opportunity yesterday to talk with Dr. Bakshi about her experience with COVID at home. And we wanted to take some time to talk Albertans through some of the ways that they can make their homes a little bit safer. With over 60,000 documented active cases in Alberta and an understanding that it is exceptionally undocumented, and that hundreds of thousands of Alberta households are currently experiencing COVID inside their spaces, we wanted to make sure that folks at home would have all of the tools and information to mitigate that risk, to break those chains of transmission, and to navigate detrimental messaging. Lately, you have heard us talk a lot about rejecting the fatalistic view that everyone will get COVID, which brings us to today's topic. So when COVID comes home, what can you do? Can you do anything? So that's what we will unpack today. In addition to Dr. Vipond, I am so grateful to have three amazing guests with me. I'm going to start with a round of introductions, and then we'll see about taking Cynthia's question, and then we will dive deep into the air. I am thrilled to introduce Robert Bean, an ASHRAE Fellow, distinguished lecturer. He's a retired engineering technology professor who specializes in design of indoor environments and high-performance building systems. Robert, before I bring other people on to the stream, tell me what ASHRAE is, because I even can't pronounce it right unless I reread it twice.
Right. So ASHRAE is a collective of engineers, worldwide engineers. We have about 53,000 members, and we write codes and standards that people use or standards, primarily standards, but our members do work on code committees as well. And so when buildings are engineered and designed, they refer to the documents that we produce.
Perfect. Okay. So a lot of technical knowledge that you have that I do not have that we are going to be able to unpack today, and I am very excited about it. I also have with me today Amanda Hugh, a maker in Calgary, a DIY air cleaner and airborne advocacy specialist guru nut. I don't know what term you want to go with the World Health Network Airborne Group and Fresh Air Schools Alberta. Yes?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
You can use whatever word as long as we're talking about cleaning the air.
I love it. I love it. I feel like we're going to be talking a lot about cleaning air today in order to keep people safe from an airborne virus. And our final panelist of the day is Ryan Uter, an Ottawa-based parent of two tiny humans whose partner is a frontline healthcare worker. We've asked Ryan to be here with us today, one, because he's awesome, two, because he has a lot of experience and knowledge, and three, because your family was successfully able to keep COVID in a human as opposed to the rest of the humans that you lived with as well. Yes?
Yes, we were.
Yes. Which
we're very proud of it.
Is absolutely amazing. And I know information that everybody at home will be able to gain so much from. Now, before we move, oh, no, we're going to move right in because yes, we are. I'm going to start with you, Ryan, I think, because I would like to start with the personal before we move into the technical. And I know that you also have a lot of technical knowledge, as well as my understanding is you've worked in international development and health, and that you have an MA in international affairs and are currently pursuing an MSc in epidemiology. And so I'm feeling the start with the personal, move into the science, and then move back into how those two can safely become one in everybody's homes to keep people safe. So I'm going to momentarily remove Amanda and Robert from our conversation. And I'm going to ask you, Ryan, so please tell us this story of, well, one, I suppose, I guess the successes and I can only imagine a lot of the feelings that you and your significant other went through when COVID came home from work.
Sure. Thanks for having me on, Michelle. And just to set the stage a little bit, my partner is an emergency physician, and over the holidays was working quite a bit leading up to Christmas. And on Christmas Eve was not feeling well, so we instituted our isolation protocols that we had prepared. And Christmas morning actually tested positive on a rapid antigen test. So obviously timing was terrible in a lot of respects, but we kind of pulled things together and opened presence via FaceTime and managed that way. But I wanted to share a little bit about some of the techniques we employed to try to prevent transmission within the household. And thank you for noting my background, but I have to say a lot of what I've learned has been, through people like Robert and Amanda, who've been sharing details on Twitter. And I'm not an engineer, but I've certainly learned a lot about airborne transmission and how to mitigate it throughout the pandemic. So I'll tell you a little bit about how we did that. I mean, first of all, preparation. I think just having some of these tools that I'll talk about ready to go in place and knowing where you're going to deploy them was really helpful for us because we were hitting the ground running when it happened. So first of all, we isolated my partner, and I want to acknowledge here that we have the privilege of having the space in our home to do that, and that's not always possible. So hopefully we can talk about how to do it in different kind of housing configurations. But we have a floor that we were able to dedicate to her staying in, used plastic sheeting to put up. I did have a little presentation. If you want to throw that up, you're welcome to, but we don't need it. I think it's, there we go. So we've got a little isolation zone, and there's my partner behind the plastic sheeting. And I'll come back in a minute to the photo on the left with the air cleaner there. But first, just to talk about what we did on ventilation. We used the plastic, and we kept the HVAC system running the entire time, and tried to create a negative pressure zone within that isolation space if we could, by cracking a window or two here and there, and just making sure we weren't forcing air back into the sort of clean area. Secondly, we used filtration. So what you see in the bottom left there is what's known as a Corsi-Rosenthal box, named after the people that invented it. It's a do-it-yourself DIY filtration air filter using a store-bought fan. And if you want to go to the next slide, there'll be some more photos of those. Store-bought fans and MERV 13 furnace filters. They basically, you put them together, it pulls the air through the filters, and you end up creating clean air using that. And often it cleans more air than a lot of the commercially available HEPA units. So the one on the left you see there, the white one, actually was being lent to my neighbor because they had a case in their household, and we're using it there. So the one on the right is the one we used in the isolation zone, along with a smaller HEPA unit that my partner kept near her and with her when she was sleeping. And the rest of the house, if you want to go to the next one, you'll see one other HEPA unit that we purchased. I think I have 4 in the house. I'm a little bit of a HEPA and air purifier nut, so it was kind of useful to have all these once we had the case of COVID arrive in the house. So in the rest of the house, we kept those HEPA filters running and just kept separate. Lastly, masking for when my partner did come out, we kept that to a minimum, and I know in a lot of cases that won't really be possible. But masking with good high quality respirators, I've got these are our preferred ones, Vitacor Can 99, made in BC. But there's lots of great options out there. So just wearing a respirator whenever she came out of her isolation zone, and we could wear those too if we're interacting with her. So I think lastly, the last slide I have there, if you want to move to that, is just paying attention to everyone's mental and physical health. I was pulling the heavy weight of keeping the kids occupied while we are also isolating in the home and keeping my partner, I hope, well fed. And the photo on the right there is us celebrating New Year's because her isolation happened to fall over both Christmas and New Year's holidays, so it was a bit of a trip. But happy to answer any more questions, and a shout out to Robert and Amanda for providing some of the details, in fact, that I used and implemented here in my own home.
There will be questions. There will be many questions, and there will be some words from Amanda and Robert around some of the design stuff for some of that stuff. I must admit that I too have a Corsi Rosenthal box that I built at home, and I don't know when I became an aerosol fangirl, but I did tweet a picture of my Corsi Rosenthal that was primarily constructed with purple colored duct tape. Made me very excited inside. And within 3 minutes, Jim Rosenthal tweeted me back, and we had a lovely little conversation, and my fangirl self got pretty excited, to then which I had to contact another aerosol scientist, Connor Rizicki, who's part of our crew, and be like, why do I love aerosol so much? It's absolutely fascinating.
Welcome to the last year and a half of my life.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. What were some of so we could see you guys having the lovely glass of wine on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Champagne, beautiful, on New Year's Eve. How did your kids cope with having mom behind a plastic barrier?
You know what? I was shocked at how well they adapted to that. We found out on Christmas morning that my partner had the positive rapid test, and so immediately kind of changed the plans from opening presents together to having it on FaceTime. But I think the kids felt it was a bit more of an audience for them, so they actually did great. There were 8 more days after that where we were isolating, so it wasn't ideal, but we're very fortunate. My kids are slightly older now, so 7 and 10, and fairly independent. They're both reading and listening to podcasts and drawing, so we did okay. It was fortunate in some sense that it was over the holidays when we didn't have a lot of other commitments going on, and we had already canceled plans to see family, so it was fine.
A lot of the folks at home that join us are parents. We do spend a fair bit of time talking about tiny humans and the impacts that all of this has had on them. As a parent, what would be your advice to the parent in isolation or the parent on the outside if you happen to be fortunate enough to have that 2-parent household situation? That one sort of walk away that you took from going through this with your kids.
Oh, that's a tough one. First of all, I'd say preparation. Be prepared for this happening. It's a reality right now that it's going to befall many families. So having that conversation, as a family. And, like I said, welcome to last 18 months of my life. My kids have heard all that conversation about COVID being airborne, and are well acquainted with all the HEPA and Corsi Rosenthal purifiers in our home. I don't know if I have any amazing advice on the emotional side. Maybe some other parents can jump in and and offer things like that.
What I heard, and I mean, correct me if I heard incorrectly, was that a great deal of transparency in your home around how COVID is transmitted, as well as a possibility that this could happen, might have saved some of the fear that the tiny humans had on the other side of when it did actually happen. Because if they are already in that full place of being able to say COVID is airborne and we are prepared, it seems to me that that would be exceptionally helpful. Of then it's not a scary unknown. It's something that we've talked about as a family, and have a plan, which I know planning helps me.
Yeah, I mean, I think kids can react differently, and I give a lot of credit to our kids for rolling with it, and for accepting parents that are slightly obsessed with this topic. So, your results may vary. Obviously, some kids will have anxiety around COVID in general, and the fact that a parent has it. But they understand the importance of vaccination. And my partner was boosted a month or two before as a healthcare worker, and I myself was boosted the day before she started becoming symptomatic. The kids received their second dose a few days before, so I think they were not terribly worried at that point. The odds are it would be a mild course. Not to say that Omicron is mild, and obviously at a society level we have huge problems, but yeah, explaining the reality of what is likely, how the course is likely to go, I think is helpful.
Thank you so very much for sharing some insight into your experience with having COVID at home after 2 years of trying to prevent COVID coming home.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring Amanda and Robert into the conversation. I may pause us at a moment in time to allow Cynthia's question to happen for Dr. Vipond, but he's currently not in my bubbles of sight. So I will wait till he returns to make that happen. Hello again, team. It is so lovely to have you back. Before we get into sharing some schematics, some drawings, some options, some ways that one can approach this at home, just based on listening to Ryan's story, what are the couple of key moments for each of you that he brought up, that he said he got a lot of this information from wonderful humans like you guys, that you are like, thumbs up, it is a victory, people are hearing us? Robert, maybe starting with you and then over to Amanda.
Well, all I can say, Ryan, is after 40 years of being in the business, that to see someone take the knowledge that we share from the engineering community and apply it and get it to work brings a tear to my eye. It's awesome. And before I continue, Michelle, I was introduced in the introduction as a professor. That would be an insult to academia, so I was never a professor. And although I do lecture at academic institutions, I was never a full-time professor. I don't want to insult any of the professors.
My apologies probably for my lack of ability to read over my fangirling of aerosolism. I don't know, because I can see right in front of me on the screen, distinguished lecturer. It's been a long week. We're all in that place. Thank you very much, Robert. I know probably two people who are tenured, and everyone else that I know that teaches at a post-secondary institution is a sessional. So I know that those tenured folks have worked beyond hard to make it where they are. So I think that they will appreciate our retraction Amanda, how about you? What did you take away from Ryan's story in terms of thumbs up? This is just great.
I mean, preparation. I mean, when we talk about being prepared, having things around, and the preparation for your family is huge. And just normalizing the idea that having this stuff around, having fun with it, it's something that I think it helps bring some normalcy to the pandemic. I know that that's kind of something that helps in my household with my 3-year-old. Obviously, I'm going to have aerosol mitigations around because that's something that really interests me. And yeah, so it makes it something that's not abnormal. And at least when you have that stress of encountering a case in your home, that's not an additional stress to have to be, kind of gathering all this information. And so I think that that's kind of the takeaway for me. And I think the idea of, when you were talking about moving, setting up pressure areas and making sure that kind of you have the person who's isolated, and then you decide to kind of pull the air out, and having that barrier, and then having a really high capacity air purifier really helpful. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a great execution and applaud it. I think the other thing that's relevant too is, you spoke to about the privilege of having that space. And I think that's a really important thing to talk about, because I know a lot of people who have successfully done this as well in, 2-bedroom apartments with a shared bathroom. And it's really just about understanding where the air goes and where you need to keep it. And so it's doable in different ways. And even when you don't have as much space to deal with.
In a moment, we're going to transition into some of those specifics, and I am going to ask Robert to share some schematics and ways that configurations can happen, as well as look at some of those high priority must-haves, as well as those, if you can, would be great to have added extras. Before we do that, I'm just going to bring Dr. Vipond up for one quick second. That way I can ask Cynthia's question from CTV. Dr. Vipond, she was wondering, or stated that we're expecting masks and rapid tests for schools by the end of the week, but it looks like we won't be getting them fully distributed by the end of the week. How do you think this is going to affect schools in our province?
It wasn't that long ago I was really excited about rapid tests and the potential it could provide, because it seemed that we would be able to find those asymptomatic spreaders before they became symptomatic, and therefore could use it as a test to stay type of tool. So, for schools, say Bobby gets sick in chair 2, well, all the people around Bobby could be, instead of going home and isolating for a week, could be just testing themselves every day to see if one day magically their test turns positive, then they stay at home and the rest of the class can continue on. What we're learning with Omicron is that those rat tests are testing late. So they're actually tending to test on day 1, 2, or 3 of symptoms. And so the PCR tests are preceding those. And of course, we can't get PCR tests. So this is no longer a great tool for tests to stay. And I would say that it's going to be taking the place of, Ralph now has sniffles. Is this COVID? And then testing serially for this symptomatic illness. So as far as protecting classrooms, I don't think rats are going to be an effective tool. And I would just say also that the surgical masks, unless they're modified to prevent the inhalation of virus, that these surgical masks aren't effective tools for kids. And I would really encourage all parents to consider getting a respirator style mask. They're hard to come by, but they're out there. And you can also take those surgical masks and modify them by making a brace, a surgical brace, or a mask brace. You can find templates online. Or there's a nifty little treatment you can do to it called, I'm going to get this right, I think, knot, tuck, and tape. So knot, tuck, tape technique to improve the fit of those masks. So those are the two things I would do with the provincially provided masks. And I would encourage the province to consider getting respirator style masks for all kids going forward.
Thank you very much. Now back to our topic. Robert, I'm bringing you up. We have the schematics ready to go. I am unmuting you. Oh, maybe I'm not. I'm not. You're going to unmute yourself, Robert, because it's just not going to let me because you remuted. Oh, perfect. It is brilliant, brilliant,
All
brilliant. So here we go. Okay. I'm a rather A-type person, Robert, sometimes. And let's put me in a scenario where I need to pre-plan to prevent disaster. So if my credit card and I felt comfortable, talk me through / show me, we'll bring up your slides, the ultimate preparatory setup.
Okay. I think before you pull out your credit card, you really need to get into a frame of mind, much like Ryan and his family did. And that was to get into a state where this is a learning experience for everybody and that you aren't helpless. There are things that you can do, and be confident in that security that there are ways that you can get through this, as Ryan and his family have. So now you can pull out your credit card. So what we really want to understand is that air, although we tend to see it as a gas, it is actually a fluid, and it's a conveyor belt. And so whatever is on that conveyor belt will move throughout the home. And what we want to avoid is those infected individuals who are delivering contaminated air, the virus on the air, onto a conveyor belt that can get moved throughout the home. So that's the first thing we want to do, is we want to prevent that. And in fact, that's actually the simplest part. And the reality is you probably have everything in your home to resolve that particular challenge. And so if you want to bring up the slide or the website. So what we did is we knew a long time ago that this thing was going to spin out of control, and that people would be in home with some or one or more people that would be infected, and that there was no solutions coming from any of the health organizations, whether at the federal level, or provincial level, or even in our municipal systems. It just wasn't going to happen. And so we wanted to create examples of rooms with or without bathrooms that could be used as isolation suites, if you will, just like Ryan did. And so the first thing we want to do is we need to recognize is that air will move throughout your house. Predominantly in Canada, most HVAC systems, which is the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, are air-based, which means you're going to have a furnace. For those that have hydronic or steam or electric, it's a little bit of a different story, but the primary principle here is that air is going to move, and you want to prevent any air from a room that you've assigned as the isolation room to move anywhere where there's going to be people who are still healthy and are not infected. So what we want is we want a space that we can close off. And so this example here is typical of a bedroom with an attached bathroom, more of a modern facility because there's a ceiling fan. Not all bathrooms have ceiling fans, and particularly in the older houses, and we'll get into that in a second. So this representation identifies that we have a door entering the bedroom, and we have windows in the bathroom and the bedroom, and a door, of course, joining into the bathroom. So the first thing we want to do is we want to stop any airflow from leaving this room, contaminating the spaces that the healthy people or the uninfected people are in. So we close the door, and then we want to either tape it, the bottom part, any leakage that could occur, put a towel up against it, whatever it takes. Just be creative. You just do not want to have any air leaving that bedroom into the hallway or any to adjoining spaces. And then the next thing we want to do is we want to open up windows. We need to get air, outdoor air coming into the space and the contaminated air leaving the space. So we're going to use the bathroom fan. So the bathroom fan is going to be running continuously. And if you take air out of a space, air needs to come into the space. So we don't want to encourage air to come from within the house. We want it to come from the outdoors. So that's the reason why we open up a window. That costs nothing. Everybody has a towel. Everybody has windows. That costs absolutely nothing to do that. But that becomes the barrier. That stops the airflow from the house into the bedroom or vice versa. But the other thing that might be in that room will be the diffusers or the registers of the grills that are sending air into the space or taking air out of the space. And you'll see there's a note there, sealed return air. So one of the things that we don't also want to happen is we don't want someone exhaling contaminated air into the space and then the heating, ventilation, air conditioning system, the HVAC system, to pull that air into the plenum, the ductwork, take it into the furnace, pass through some type of a filter, and we'll talk about that later, and then be redistributed back into the space. Now, I want to make sure that people understand.
Can I ask you a quick question, Robert?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Do we mean my cold air return? So like the big one?
Exactly.
Okay. So I want to cover that cold air return.
Correct.
If I'm the human isolating in this particular setup.
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Now, we want to be really careful here. There are not a lot of research work that can suggest that COVID is traveling in the ductworks and being distributed. There are some cases where they're finding virus in the ductwork, but it's not something that we want to be paranoid about. Okay, so at this point, we need to recognize that it's a possible path for distribution, but it's also at this point something that doesn't happen a lot, and there are very few cases that demonstrate that this does happen. So let's not get paranoid here. Why we're closing it off is it's all about elevating and eliminating risk. So we sealed up the return air, we seal up the door. If there's any supply errors into the space, you can seal it up, but keep in mind that that's a positive pressure outlet, the air coming out to heat or cool the room. It is another step of risk reduction by covering up, and that's fine to do that. But the return air is the one that we want to focus on, and underneath the doors. So then get out your credit card, and for those that have the wherewithal, there's elevated things that you can buy. For those that are on limited budgets, rest assured that you can build one of these Corsi boxes, Rosenthal boxes, for less than $200, and they'll last easily 6 to 7 months before you have to rebuild them again. And so we'll show some photographs of that later on. I mean, I think Clean Air Crew, Amanda, I think you guys have some videotapes on how to build these things. Is that right?
Yeah, we have, Clean Air Crew and the World Health Network. We've done a bunch of resources and we've posted them to each other. And so there's a lot of stuff out there. And I know that some people get intimidated by building their own air purifier. Like it sounds, and then also they wonder, does this actually work? Because I built it myself. And I've had people say to me, I have 2 left hands and I managed to build one of these. And so it's just pretty simple. You just have to make sure that the arrows on the filters are going the right way and the air is coming out of it. And it's once you put it together, it's pretty fantastic. And the air cleaning capacity, I mean, there's just a study that came out that said it's going to beat $1,000 air purifiers out of the water. So
totally
blow them out of the water. Yeah.
And as a human who would not consider themselves technically inclined in any way, shape, or form, who did build a Corsi Rosenthal, there's arrows on those filters to help you know which way to point them, combined with you rip duct tape. You don't need to cut it with scissors.
Yeah,
because when you spend all of your time trying to cut it with shears, it will get stuck to your body. Yeah. But you can rip it and then it won't.
Yep, it's fantastic to be able to be empowered to build something that is so effective.
Yeah, and have fun with it. I mean, it's going to be a very useful device, but it's a learning experience, and it gives you an opportunity to drink adult beverages.
So you can put it together even if you've had several of those. So.
You can, and the reality is, it takes less than 20 minutes. I've built so many of those things now. You can do them in your sleep. And man, I don't know how long it took you to build yours, or but they're so easy to make.
Yeah. And once you get practiced, I think I've done, you can do it in 20, 25 minutes. And once you start doing them en masse, you really pick up the pace. So, and that's something that I hope we can be doing more in Alberta, is building a lot of them and disseminating.
So let's
For folks at home, though, who are like me, I will say that the first attempt that I made at building one was not a 20-minute adventure. It was not an hour-long adventure. It was probably closer to a 4-hour-long adventure, while doing other things, I will admit. It did exceptionally speed up once I realized you could rip the duct tape. I just don't want anyone to be discouraged, because I was so pleased with it when it was done. But it was definitely, the first time was a teeny bit of a process. And so cut yourself a lot of slack and just be excited that you're actually doing something with your hands, which just feels really good.
After the first one, you work out all the kinks, and then you know what to do.
Yeah, for sure. So let's have the page up again, and it's illustrated on the portable filter MERV 13 or better. And the reality is, MERV 13 is fine, and you can buy these things anywhere, online. All the home supply stores have them. For those that are listening, you're going to be looking for a MERV 13. If you go to the big box stores, they're going to probably be selling something that has a brand name of Filtrete on it, which is fine. Those are you want to pick the 1900 or the 2300 series. But it's almost worth going to watch people buy filters. It's actually kind of entertaining, and probably a great place for marriage counselors to pick up clients. But MERV 13, Filtrete 1900 series or 2200 series, and you'll be fine. Put them together and put them in the room. And you're going to run these things all the time, 24 hours. As long as the bathroom fan is running, this fan should be on, and the open window should be on. And they can't, in a smaller room, these box fans on the higher speed can be a little bit noisy. Some people might find that to be a problem for them sleeping. On the low speed, they're not too bad. But let's face it, we're talking about triage here. People are sick, and we're just going to have to tolerate some things that we would not normally tolerate, but it's not forever. It's just for a few weeks, if that. So get that going. And then, because we live in a cold climate, it's not always convenient to open up a window and then, of course, have thermal comfort, where you're going to have some thermal discomfort. So using some type of space heater. So get out your credit card again, and if you can afford to buy some space heaters, then I would recommend that you look at doing that. Just a word of caution on space heaters is that they have been known to cause fires when improperly operated. And so you want to follow the manufacturer's instructions on them. So just be very careful with them. But again, this is short term. This isn't permanent heat for the room. This is heat for the room while the person's in there recovering. And so the portable filter, that's a must. The electric heater, that obviously might be a must. One of the other things that I would recommend, if you have the wherewithal, is to buy a humidifier. And one of the favorite ones that I have has a UV light in it, which is a disinfectant light. And it's effective in terms of making sure we don't have any bacteria in the water. One of the problems with humidifiers is that people oftentimes don't change the water, or the water becomes stagnant, and it in turn then can cause illness. So we want to make sure that we're keeping the humidifiers clean. And if you can, buy humidifiers that have some type of way of getting rid of the bacteria that can grow inside of water systems. And then the next thing is the CO2 sensor, carbon dioxide, not monoxide, but dioxide. And this is an instrument that you can pick up. Amanda, I think you had yours there. You were showing it off earlier on. If you could bring them out, there it is. And these, you're at
very good right now. Sorry.
What have you been doing in that room?
I've just been talking, and it just fills up.
Keep that up there. I want to actually use this, because normal background carbon dioxide in the atmosphere ranges anywhere between 400 and 550 parts per million. So Amanda looks like she's been doing jumping jacks or something.
I think
1600.
I think someone's cooking with gas upstairs. It's
Yeah. So there's a lot of, it's a respiratory measurement that we're looking at here because the body expels carbon dioxide, but it is also available through other processes. Cooking actually will also generate some CO2. So in this case, and this is actually a good example that, when you see numbers like that from these little devices, that you should open up the window further and ventilate the space. And you would normally, like, I have these in several rooms, and we use them as a regular indicator that the room air needs to be changed at a much higher rate. So going back to Ryan, did you have a CO2 meter in your?
I do. It's on loan right now, but I have the same model that Amanda does. Yeah, we use that as well. I find in the winter, the CO2 tends to stay a little lower. I don't know, Robert, if the stack effect in a leaky house seems to freshen the air inside, but that's what we experience.
Yeah. So I wouldn't get too concerned when you start getting in. I mean, if you're in the 550, 650, 750, 850, but as soon as you get into 850 and you're starting to approach 1,000, you know what? Open up the windows a little bit more. And
my husband just texted me and said, I am cooking on the gas range right now. So
is he sharing? Do we all get food tonight or what?
Yeah, just come over. I mean, I guess we'll have to send it to you, Ryan, but
that'd be great.
Yeah.
Robert, I feel like you're going to tell us about the hood fan, though, and the dangers there. This is what I remember.
If we had more time, I would get into that because it's one of my soapboxes, for sure. So going back to tonight's subject, so we have the fan, and that's there to filter the air in the space that the person who has the virus and is infected, and that's to make sure that whatever air they're breathing out is clean. We don't want them rebreathing the infected air. That's like, having a wound and keeping it infected. We don't want to be doing that. So the filters for the occupant, but also to make sure that if there is any risk at all of air leaving that space into other adjoining spaces, that has been cleaned as well. So the fan, humidifier, the electric heater, and the CO2 sensors. So if you can, if you're on a limited budget, at the very least, get the fan, because that's going to clean the air, and opening up the windows and sealing the room up. You probably have everything that you need in your house for that right now. And that fan, like I said, for under $200, it's going to be less than that depending on what you're paying for box fans and filters, but budget $200 and you'll be fine. The CO2.
Ryan, I was just going to say, Ryan's that you used the round fan, which is kind of something that we've been looking at, because you can use a box fan, but there's also options for using round fans as well.
So I've made both. The box fan was first, and I did find it a touch noisy for our living space. So I wanted to try the round fan. And Amanda, I stumbled across your video putting one of those together yesterday. So thanks for that. This one I tried to do without the box on it, and I think it has a bit more airflow and a little quieter. So there are definitely some different options out there if you're willing to make a little extra effort.
Yeah, and and that's a good point. I mean, people like kitchen fans. Oh, see, we're going down that path.
Don't do it, Robert. Don't do it.
If it's noisy, they won't use it, right? And as soon as you shut the fan off, then you've shut down the ability to filter the air. So if sound, some people are really sensitive to sounds, then you want to be picking quiet fans, and the round ones for sure are going to be a better solution. So, that's we've addressed.
Sorry, I want to say, Robert, I still use the box fan one though, and it's I used it for months before I upgraded. I just have a little bit of a obsession with perfecting things, so people should still make the box fan ones. They're really easy.
They're super simple.
The interesting thing about the round fan is that it actually is a lower frequency sound than the box fan.
Yes.
And so that does help with that irritation of sound, that it's not always necessarily more quiet, but the lower frequency does help. And so those things do matter too, in terms of when you're mitigating that kind of stuff, that if it's going to be really irritating for someone while they're sick and recovering, those things matter. And so, that was something that our team worked on a lot, because we all have people with sensitivities to, sound and light, and on our team and in our families. And so, it's more about doing something that's going to be in the space and work, and rather than, you know, it being perfect too, because all of these mitigations are better than nothing.
Yeah, totally.
So in the interest of time, because I do have a bunch of questions that people have sent that I would like to ask, as well as a couple of my own. Now, Robert, obviously we are going to be tweeting out the website with all of the schematics on it. What other rooms do you have outlaid on there? So we looked at one that was a bedroom with an attached bathroom, just for folks at home so they know what they can look for when they go on. What other rooms do you have?
Do you want to bring it up and we'll just quickly scroll through it? Just so they can, when they go to the website. So just scroll to the next one. It's the same room, but no bathroom fan. So now what do we do when there's no bathroom fan? So there's a solution for that. Next image. Then this one is where there's no ability to put in either a window fan or a bathroom fan. It's just a temporary solution. It's got some flaws because we're using wind and some science to move the air through the space. But if in the event that you don't have money right away to make a Corsi fan, or they're back ordered and you can't get them, you can move air through a space without fans. So that's there. Next image. Here's where we actually have an ability to put a fan in the bathroom, and so it's basically the same as the first image, but this one is where there's no ceiling fan and you actually have to mount a fan in the window. Next image. All right, this actually one that I want to pay a little bit of time onto. If your house has what we call a natural draft appliances, in other words, there's no fan to remove the exhaust fans, what can happen is if you put a room into a negative pressure, is it's possible to depressurize the home. And what we're talking about depressurization, we're actually talking about pulling products of combustion down the chimney instead of letting it go up. And now you're going to introduce carbon monoxide into the space, and carbon monoxide kills. And I would just want to really caution people that if you don't know what you have in your house, hire a contractor or an engineer to come out and tell you what you have before you start playing around with depressurizing the buildings. I wish we could spend more time on this, but read the notes. It's all there. Just be very careful in this particular application. Next image. So this is when we get into two units that are sharing a bathroom. And the first one, figure 6, is where the person on the left-hand side, the person that is infected, has access to the bathroom. And then once they're done, how does the person who's uninfected use the bathroom? And so it's really about you're really coordinating with each other to use the space, and then decontaminating the space, both the air and the surfaces in that bathroom in between use. So this image here is for when the infected person needs to use the washroom. And then the next slide, if you scroll down, shows how to make that transition. So really it's about coordinating it. So then if you want to go down to the next image, those are just some examples. If you are on a really low budget, and I know there's some people that are out there and they're going, we just have no money and we can't do this. You can buy a single fan and put a single filter behind it. That is better than not having a box. So if you are on a really, really tight budget and you need to build something, take a single fan. You can zip tie it, you can tape it, whatever it is, just put the fan behind it, and that will get you at least some filtration in the space. It's not the best, but if that's what you can afford, then do that. And then some of the other assemblies that we built for people. Keep scrolling up. We're down. These are just some examples of other ones. This is in my office. You can see the filter that's up on the desk. And if you go to the next one, these are just series of different fans. There's the box there. And then the next one, which is in one of the bedrooms. And I got to tell you, I have several different makes. The box one, hands down, is the best one. It's the lowest money. If you have to replace the filters, it's going to be the least cost. It has way better performance. So I'm probably going to get in trouble with the manufacturers, but the reality is you can make a much better product for a lot less money. And so just set yourself a budget, 200, and don't spend any more than that.
I think mine was 150. And yeah, the calculations we did is it well outperformed everything else in the house.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's an interesting thing about these boxes, right? Because they you look at, why do they clean air so much? It's because they have so much surface area,
Yeah.
and then they pull all of this air through. And so even if the filters themselves are not as, efficient at pulling particles out like a HEPA filter, it's because you're moving more air through it. And so that's kind of one of the really amazing things about this design, and the ability to kind of just build something that is so effective. And
Yeah.
it took me a while to learn about it, so I could actually convince myself. And then also there's also been studies that have been coming out that also show it's effective.
So then if you could go to back to the web page, Michelle, and on the one last image there. So we've talked about, keep going. Yeah, right there. So we've talked about the bare minimum is to get the fan or the fan filter. That's the bare minimum. And then there's the CO2 sensor. That's one of the ones that we have here. There's some different style masks. And as Joe said, and as everybody here on the podcast agrees, and anybody that knows anything that I trust, after 40 years, you become pretty cynical about people that say things. And I am as cynical as the next engineer. And I got to tell you that when it comes to the people that got it right at the beginning is the people that understood aerosol transmission and the need to have high quality masks and make sure that they fit well. And those are just some samples there that I have in my inventory as well. And then if you have extra cash, that you can afford to buy the heaters and the CO2 meters, the oxygen meters, and then rapid tests, which I use to see, for me, it's a level of confidence. How am I feeling right now? And am I able to get out and do the things that I want to do without, creating problems for other people? So it's more about for my confidence level and making sure that I'm making the best decisions so that if I am infected, I'm not infecting other people. So that's it.
And for folks who are listening, Robert, versus those who are following along visually, the website that we have been referencing throughout this so far is
healthyheating.com. So not healthy eating, although that's good too. That's good too. Healthy heating, and then healthyheating.com.
And Amanda, Brian has mentioned some excellent videos of you building things. Where do I go?
So we've got them on, it's Fresh Air Schools on YouTube. And then we also have our Fresh Air Schools Twitter account. So it's Fresh Air AB. And we also got like Clean Air Crew. They've got a ton of our stuff. So we just collaborate and share each other's work, because it's kind of this collaborative process, I think, of building information and then physically building filters that it's been really exciting.
So we're going to do a speed round of questions here, one of which I think we touched base on, but I just want to reconfirm. We are changing our filters every 6 or so months for Corsi Rosenthal boxes. There's a lot of head nodding.
Yeah, and I think it really, when I've talked to Jim Rosenthal about it, and Robert, I'm sure can confirm this, like it's usually, if you're using it for COVID mitigation, 6-7 months. For the reason I got into building these filters was for wildfire smoke. And so if you're using something like that where the air is quite dirty and it's going to get a lot of dirt and particulates, then you might have to replace them sooner, like 3 or 4 months. Robert, does that track for you?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So we have acknowledged, but I'd like to really reinforce the fact that a lot of this conversation did involve my fictional credit card, and that we really were approaching this from a lot of privilege. One of the takeaways that I took from the beginning of your conversation with us today, Robert, was if COVID followed me home and I was now at home and I was there and there was no changes that I could make because I was not a pre-planner and my credit card is maxed out, which it is, quite frankly. Closing my door, blocking the bottom of it, closing off those registers, opening windows where I can, and trying to get that air to still move would be a really good first step. And then possibly layer that with some continuous masking, and I could mitigate the risk with some of those layers to the folks in my shared space with nothing except for those things. I realize that's not the
Right.
gold standard of, you know, if we had 6 fictional credit cards that Michelle was sharing, but with the maxed out credit card, those are some good initial steps. Yes, just as
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There are things that you can do. So for those that are listening and you are, you know, because you've got bill to pay and there's food that needs to go on the table and all that kinds of stuff, like we get it. We've all been there. And but there are things that you can do and without having to spend any money at all. And that is put the person, isolate them, close off the air. It just means that they're going to have to be a little bit more active in terms of opening, because it gets cold out. We can't keep windows open and have them freeze too, right? And have them die of something else or get sick of something else. And obviously, we're hoping for that all recovery, everybody recovers. Ryan, it sounds like you have a good story to tell in terms of recovery, so that's awesome to hear. By the way, so they're just going to have to be cognizant of opening and closing windows and turning fans on and off if that's available to them.
And okay, so we'll do like 2 more quick round questions because I know we're at the hour, but we started a few minutes late. And so I'm like, we're 4 minutes over the hour and we paused for a question from CTV. So I'm just going to get a couple more of these in. Amanda, you had mentioned having some success with folks who were in multifamily complexes or apartments and more of that larger shared living space areas. I would love to hear a little bit about that before we...
Well, I think it's, you know, I mean, one of our, you know, who lives in India, she had contracted COVID and she lives with her 2 parents, and they have, you know, an apartment and her bedroom, and there was a shared bathroom. And so, you know, a lot of what she did was about isolating people in spaces. And so if she had to go use their shared washroom, she made sure her parents were as far away from her in the farthest bedroom. And she would go in and they had all of the exhaust fans running. You know, she had air purifiers, but even if you don't, it's about kind of building those barriers because, you know, the analogy that has been used as people start to understand airborne transmission more, you know, smoke in the air, I think that's a really useful thing to think about. So if you are trying to keep food smells from cooking or smoke from cooking, what do? You close the door, and then you kind of stop the air from moving into other spaces. And you know, those particulates move in the same way. And so she always had her parents move as far away from her room as she could. She was wearing a respirator. She would go in, she would come out, they would wait for the space to air out. And that's part of it too, is just that those particles remain for a little bit. So you want to make sure that the space, when you can remove the air or filter the air, that you wait for a little bit until those particulates might have dissipated or been removed or filtered. And then she would isolate in her room, then her parents were safe to come back into their space or safer. And so it's just about, once you understand how the airflow can help protect you, it's not as daunting, I think, as it's made out to be. And the idea that we just have to accept that everybody is going to get COVID, I think a lot of it comes from the idea that a lot of people don't know that you are breathing it in because someone has recently breathed it out into the space, and then that's part of how you're getting infected. And so I think that that's a very basic understanding that once more people know, I think it becomes more intuitive and it's less intimidating.
Mm-hmm.
So my true speed round of questions, all 3 of you are going to answer at the exact same time. They are going to be very straightforward questions, and I'm curious to see how it goes. Okay, so we hear a lot about whether or not you should have your furnace fan running on as opposed to auto. On, auto, or off?
On.
Okay, what particulate rate or degree or whatever, I don't know things about filter do you have in your furnace?
MERV 13.
MERV 13.
Now, can you put a MERV 13 in your home furnace, or is that challenging for your furnace's motor?
Ask your HVAC technician.
I say don't. I'll say don't, and I'll tell you why. Because they all tell me to put MERV 8, but the MERV 8 in the Filtrite line actually has a higher resistance than the MERV 13. So
Right.
in that sense, sometimes the HVAC technicians don't know. And Robert, if I'm wrong, you correct me here. You actually are the engineer, but this is what I've learned by looking at the box and talking with other engineers, is that it's actually lower resistance.
So I'm gonna make swag here. For those that don't know what a swag is, it's a super wild ass guess. That 80% of the people out there haven't changed their filters in a long, long time, and they're so plugged up they operate like a MERV 15 or a HEPA. And pulling them out and putting a MERV 13 is actually probably the furnace is probably going to breathe a sigh of relief. Right?
Interesting.
Ryan, I can honestly say that I have heard similar to you. My HVAC technicians have always told me to keep it below that 1,000 mark, what is in my furnace. But I can say that I did see David Elstrom recently have a conversation, about the fact that I could put in a Filtrite 1900 and that its capacity wouldn't affect my furnace motor any more than when I had the 1,000 or less.
Yeah, and the 1900 seems to be the sweet spot in terms of resistance and filtration. So if you go higher, you actually limit the airflow a little bit, and so the overall volume of air cleaned is a little less. So that's just the way I've been thinking about it.
For more information on pressure drop, follow us all on Twitter.
It's pressure drop all the time.
Start our day with a coffee and a pressure differential discussion.
And my last aerosolist geeky type question that I've just heard so much debate on, and I just a yes or a no, just to spark the conversation. This narrative that HEPA is detrimental when mechanical ventilation is already in place, true or false?
False.
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 So bad.
False.
So bad. Yeah.
And thank you all so very much. And thank you for playing my ridiculous little quick question game at the end. We had spent so much time in really, really heavy stuff. And it was great to be able to have some really meaningful, informative conversation that also got to involve some giggling, since it's all about preventing getting sick as opposed to coping with what the negative ramifications of that sickness can be. And as always, friends, this topic is much too large to discuss in an hour. And as our panelists said, follow them on Twitter or whatever social media you choose to embrace. Please visit the websites that we talked about today. That way you can take some preventative precautions in your home. And thank you all for joining us. Who can exactly be sure when we'll be back? I can honestly say, not I, friends, not I. As you know, we tend to increase our briefings in times of urgency. So remember to subscribe on whatever service you're tuning in on to receive all of the notifications. Connect with us, share your experiences. Please continue to expand the chorus, because together we can help keep each other informed and foster ongoing transparency in our communities. Next week, we will be at the 8-week mark, I believe, not this Friday, but next Friday, for tiny humans who received some of their first pediatric doses when they became available in Alberta. So if you are a parent of someone who chose to wait the 8 weeks in between dose 1 and dose 2, a good time to consider logging into the booking system and scheduling that second dose to help keep those tiny humans safe. And as always, Alberta, remember, COVID-19 is airborne. Wear the best mask with a secure fit you have access to, and vaccines are still saving lives.